Hi, motion folk. I'm Sabrina Cheney.
And I'm Penny Niederlander.
And you've tuned into NoGraph, the motion graphics podcast where motion graphics is all but forbidden as a topic of conversation.
The idea is we're all familiar with the social media peer pressure that there's always a new program to learn,
a new style to master,
endless tutorials and presentations to catch up on,
Slacks and Discords to join.
But we have this little theory that what really makes our work interesting is what people bring to it from outside our normal circles.
So here at NoGraph, we push all that aside and block out the noise and the pressure.
Every week, we'll have a special industry guest on, and we'll just talk hobbies and passions and whatever they love to do when they're not at their desk. And at the end of every episode, we'll turn the mic over to our new friend, and they'll have a couple minutes to tie it all in.
This is a podcast about our industry from the standpoint of a sustainable lifestyle and an ever-deepening well of inspiration.
Thanks for joining, and let's go.
Today we have Erin Sarofsky.
Hello. Welcome, Erin.
That was such a fun intro.
Thank you.
You're getting better at it.
It happens. Yeah, the more you do it, the better the easier it flows, the more you get used to it.
Yeah. I was very unnatural at first.
You're with us for episode 6, so we're midway through our imaginary 10-episode season.
Great.
Yeah.
It's like someday or something.
Yeah, and we're really happy to have you here. So obviously, Penny and I know you. I think a lot of our viewers may know you, but how would you define yourself?
Yeah, well, myself right now is a studio owner, designer, creative director, business owner. So I do a lot of different things. I wear a lot of different hats at different points of the day. It's I could go into every single aspect of those things as a designer. I'm a designer with a capital D. I sweat the details. Usually a little later in the process now. I used to be one of those people that was like up in it very early on. The kerning, the leading, like everything that went out had to be perfect. And I've kind of gotten better as I've aged at like going with the flow a little bit and really, just letting the process kind of take you through it. I have Harry Potter on in the background, so that's why there's all that flashing. Sorry about that. But I guess that's the point of this podcast is what, takes you out of your own head sometimes when you're working. So I am a designer with a capital D, but I'm also a business owner, and being a business owner uses a whole different part of your brain that, I don't know about most of your listeners, but most creative-led studios and even non-creative-led studios weren't business school people, you know what I mean? So we go into this very rosy and optimistic, and we have to kind of get our MBA along the way. And that doesn't come without massive learning, constantly growing, evolving as a human and as a person that supports a large staff. Yeah. So
totally.
That's the other side.
Yeah, I mean, as a studio owner and an active designer, and you've been doing this for a little while, you really have know every aspect of this field and have the control and responsibility. I'm sure that's a big part of it.
Yeah, but I also know that I never liked to be micromanaged as a designer. You know what I mean? So I try and remember what it was like to be in that zone or pocket of my life and treat people with that same kind of space to let them kind of work through the process and to give feedback that is clear and maybe pushes them a certain way, because I think the studio has a perspective, but also creates a lot of space for them to bring themselves into the work. Yeah.
I feel like that, that's, in my experience working at different studios, that can really, and in your case too, come through and show really unique and interesting work that managing can sometimes you get so into the details that you don't expand on the bigger concepts. Do you feel it's sort of a reasoning?
Yeah, it's interesting. Even as a younger designer, I've always been able, at a very young designer, I would fall into the frames and focus so much on the individual animation or this little piece of a thing that, you'd step back and you'd be like, oh man, that doesn't fit the overall thing. And I just wasted all this time. Now I'm a lot better at just seeing bigger picture and just kind of working broad strokes to get to that like fit and finish detail. But it is interesting to watch people kind of going through their career and trying to guide them through that, maybe a little less painfully than I went through it. But yeah.
Well, should we call this a good cutoff, Sabrina?
Yeah, we're gonna instill the no work talk banner.
Got it.
But that was beautiful. I think as you were speaking on your experience and liking the details, I'm wondering if in other areas of life you find yourself getting in the details as well, whether through hobbies or just like how you enter a space with your friends. And is that like part of your integral personality?
Well, I think I like a project. You know what I mean? I'm like, very project oriented. So I'll pick up a hobby and I'll go super deep into it and want to get all the gear and watch all the YouTube videos on how other people do it. And it's very similar to how I approach work with learning and experimentation and all of that other stuff. So like knitting, for example, I've been knitting for a really long time and doing fiber arts. And, once you get into a little bit of fiber, it's just like, it's a gateway to all sorts of other kinds of fiber arts. And,
Wow.
and it's so tactile. And, at first you're like, well, I like the chunky yarn because it knits up quicker and you're working maybe with one or two different patterns. And then all of a sudden you're trying a more complicated pattern. And then you start experimenting with different fibers, and then you're learning the different animals from the different, what animal creates a fiber. And then you're going to these weird festivals in Vermont. Like, you know what I mean?
Yep.
It just kind of like expands on itself. And then you start collecting other people's art, and, it's like that. But I've also started, I've been super into like collecting vintage stuff lately. The last couple of years, I've had a few friends that have been like, let's go vintage shopping. And I've started collecting vintage ornaments. And like, what do you do with all these like vintage ornaments? Well, I've started like creating these amazing wreaths out of them. So I collect all year long these ornaments. And then, come, holiday time into November, I have so many people over to my house and we make these crazy wreaths together. And it's so fabulous and fantastic. It's like one of like the most special things to get one of these wreaths and to be a part of making them. So
I love that idea. I love like a wreath making party. I used to make ornaments with my grandma. She taught me how to like take pipe cleaners and put beads on them and do like a styrofoam ball and pin fabric to it and all kinds of stuff. And just having that time with her, that was really special. So I can imagine like getting friends involved and family involved and making your own personal wreath out of the things that you collect. And that's such a good idea. Might steal it.
Yeah, go for it. I mean, my favorite YouTube videos, like tutorials that kind of help you along the way. Because for me, I didn't want to ruin the ornaments because they were vintage. And I'm like, well, what if somebody one day wants to hang these on a tree and wants to take apart this? So, it's a little bit of a combination of a few different techniques, but it seems to really, really work. I've even sent some vintage wreaths to clients, and I know I'm not supposed to talk about work, but it's like a handmade gift. It just shows how much you care about somebody, how they've transitioned from a work friend to a real friend,
Penny, do you tend to get crafty for holidays?
I used to when I was younger. I've sort of fallen off the holiday thing as I've gotten older because I don't know. I have like strong environmental like things when I see like holidays can be celebrated for like, the holiday itself, or sometimes it gets taken over by like the big box stores selling a bunch of decorations that people get. And so I have a little bit of like a hard time enjoying a lot of holidays.
It's funny. It's like, oh, you take the Charlie Brown approach. I understand. It's like capitalism, consumerism. But then it's like, well, what does the holiday mean to you? And that's where it gets like really soft and cuddly and nice.
Well, I mean, for me, the holiday is the people. Like, I think I just described the negative side, but the positive side is like you get to see people, you have time off, you have like special feeling of, like having your hot cider and talking to people you haven't seen very often. I love that.
I just
Yeah.
like to get together with people to do a thing. You know what I mean? And so during the holiday time, I tend to have a couple of these wreath making sessions at the house, and then I always have a gingerbread decorating thing where we spend gobs of money on, big boxes of candy and just like have everything laid out, and then we get the pre-made gingerbread houses because, I'm realistic.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like such a fun day. It's like everybody just gets together and it's festive, but it's an opportunity to be creative together and be silly,
I love that. I think projects are the best way to socialize. That's like a personal, like, right? And you get together for like, let's get together and drinks, and all the food is already made, and like, oh, now we're going to talk. And like that can be great. But the best memories I have are making gingerbread houses with friends or something like that.
Totally. And what's so funny about those nights is like everybody so gets in the zone of making. Sometimes it gets really quiet, and it's so fascinating. So you're just all creating together, shared resources. And if somebody's having trouble doing something or is looking for somebody, I don't know. There's just something really magical about it. So I try and do that, into the winter holidays. There's so many opportunities to do that, but we do look for something at least every season. We do pumpkin carving during, Halloween time. There's always something going on, either in the studio or at my house. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Do you think like part of the project thing as a socializing, I think of it as like the reason like Hot Ones is such a great show for interviews is because you take people out of themselves. You give them something else to do and a challenge, and it's like, even though it's just eating something spicy, it's like you get great answers because people are like, their guard is down and they're not worried about what their response should be. Like they're just getting it out. But when you're crafting with someone, you're seeing a different side of them. You're seeing them focus on a thing. They're distracted, and how they interact with you is kind of more real. Do you think there's any?
Totally. Yeah, you're just being yourself, and it's not the thing that you do for a living, so you don't have to be good at it. And sometimes, like, you even see pride in people's when they're kind of not great. You know what I mean? It's like a mess, and they're just like, "But I made this. It's so fantastic." I used to work for a company in New York, Super Fat, and they did this amazing thing. They would have figure drawing after work just at the studio, and clients used to come by and the artists used to stay and draw, and it just like collected everybody together for like those art school memories. And it was totally like, even though it was like technically the studio, it was just like a no work zone. And he would even have like an instructor from the Art Institute, I think, or maybe that's what I would do here, but that maybe it was like Pratt or somewhere come by that taught figure drawing and walk around and like kind of get everybody back into it. And I just thought it's creating community around the shared love of the arts, but like kind of moving us out of the computer and into the real world again. And that's really special. Yeah.
There's still tons of life drawing events in New York. I live in Brooklyn now, and like everywhere, all the time. I can't even begin. Like there was a goth bar somewhere in Ridgewood, and they have like costumed ones that are really fun. Society of Illustrators has life drawing. Like it goes on. It's a great way to meet people. It's a great way to have fun and practice. And I love, life drawing is a great way to bring people together for sure. I'm also curious, with antiquing, what was it about the ornaments specifically? Like, did one really speak to you once and you're like, this is going to be my thing now?
Yeah, no, I'm trying to think like what fully started it. Me and my friend Karen would, go, I think it was holiday time, and we saw one of these wreaths and it was like absolutely amazing. And then I was like, well, when I'm out and about, I'll start picking up ornaments. And then it kind of got to this absurd point where I was like, I must have hundreds of these ornaments. I got to do something with them. And, it took, one seed of something. It doesn't take much to turn me into a shopper for something. And then it was like, oh, great. Like what do we do? How do we do this now? And so then we started looking things up and building it out from there.
Oh, so cool.
And, you know, she was into it, but it was really me that was like, okay, I'm going to learn this. I'm going to perfect this. I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to figure out the process. Like, she came by and built a wreath, and hers came out beautiful, but I prepped all the ornaments. I watched all the ornaments. I got all the base materials ready. I just like, and maybe it's like a Girl Scout troop leader thing, you know what I mean? Like, or the scout mom or something like that. But I just like having that all on hand and feeling like it's project day. You know what I mean? It's really fun. And there is something about shopping that's curating. One of my other hobbies is like in real life decorating, like furniture, paint, like fit and finish details of rooms and spaces. And I just finished my house.
Congrats.
Well,
That's always really fun.
Yeah,
like,
except now,
what is my living space going to be like?
What is it going to be? Well, I'm selling the house now. Not because I really wanted to, but because the kiddo's going into first grade and we're like, well, we should move to a better school district because there's a lot of extenuating circumstances there. So I wasn't really expecting to have to do that. So I've just been kind of like emotionally dealing with that as where the people are walking through our house and like, talking about buying it. Like, yeah, I want you to buy it, but I like don't want you to buy it. I want this. I feel like I have to let go in order for it to sell. But in the meantime, we're buying another house. So we close in a couple weeks. So it's kind of like that millennial gray, whoever was in it obviously did a once over on it before they put it on the market, which I appreciate because it's not like I'm fixing things. I'm more just making it my own at this point. But you know, at night I like lay awake thinking about, okay, in this room, should I paint the ceiling blue or should I leave it white? You know what I mean? And if I close this wall off here and I move the pantry over here and like maybe I can add the hallway, you know, I just start thinking like structurally, like how much is that going to cost? Is that going to be worth the upside? You know, the design, how am I going to really use the space? Like because they always talk about in design fit for purpose. And that means like if you're moving into a home and you have like aging parents with you, you probably don't want homes that have like steps everywhere. You know what I mean? Like it's not fit for purpose. Or, you know, in my case, I have like a little, you know, 6.5, 7-year-old, she's going into first grade. So, you know, there's just things you don't want laying around, you know what I mean? Or if things are special to you, you want them to maybe be packed away or up higher on a shelf, or to like maybe just do one at a time instead of just put everything out and like, you know, let it rip. So it is an interesting thing, kind of decorating and doing the house and choosing fabrics and molding and all that. Just so many little details to doing a home, plus lighting, you know, like having warm light, wrong shoulder. There we go.
Yeah.
Light, cool lights and things like that is really super important to me. Yeah.
I was going to say that like, it seems that there's an aspect of like doing projects, like having creative control and not having a client. But now I think maybe your 6-year-old can be a bit of your client sometimes.
Oh, yeah. 6-year-old, a husband, you know?
Yeah. But do you find these as like, these are all very creative outlet?
Yeah. That's the space I exist in, you know?
Yeah.
That is not a runner, as you could probably tell. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm an outdoor person, but like with all the bug spray and sunblock and, you know, SPF a million.
Oh yeah. No, me too. But I think curating a space, it's almost not emphasized enough how much that can affect you, like mentally.
Yeah.
I think like to me, it's like a big deal to have your own space and feel comfortable and feel like it also kind of represents yourself.
Mm-hmm.
When I moved into my current apartment, I did a whole, like, I found photos of the inside before I had moved in, plugged those into Photoshop, and I was like testing out colors. I was looking at things I had found on Pinterest or Etsy and kind of like placing where I thought they might go. And when I moved in, like, that helped a lot.
It does. Yeah. It kind of helps you acclimate into the space before you even land in it, you know?
Yeah. And I imagine now with your daughter and husband having a space that you could feel like this represents me, Erin, is also really good for you. Like
Yeah.
when you're not a mom or a partner, it's like I could have my own little nook that's just for me. Do my
Yeah.
reads.
Yeah, you know, I like a creating space is definitely important. But you know, it's again that fit for purpose thing. I really have taken that to heart in terms of choosing fabrics and choosing things that I love that
It's a
can be
really
in
good
the space.
philosophy.
Yeah, can be in the space. So like I've definitely decided I can still have nice things and buy nice things. I just shouldn't put silk that's going to stain. I shouldn't buy those pillows yet because that's we have 2 dogs and 2 cats. So it's just like that's my life. Those are my choices that I've made. So like there's certain kind of fabrics that I should stay away from, but that doesn't mean like you can't have like beautiful tactile things around all the time. It just means you have to pay attention to the details and not go, I'm going to have this amazing fabric and not look into how to care for it. And,
Yeah.
you know, all
I
of
think
that.
it's the like meaning behind everything. It sounds like you could go into your house and any room you went into, you could
Yeah,
point
any
it
item.
and you would have a reason that you chose that color wall, that,
Yeah.
you know, like piece of furniture. That's like that intention is really cool.
Yeah.
That's really sometimes because so often we can be like, I don't know, I need an end table.
Yeah, it's just not like that for me. If I need an end table, like I'm very quick to make a decision. I'm very decisive. There's no regrets there. But I don't just like go to Walmart, get something for now, and then have that be the next 15 years. I'm like, okay, I need something here. Let me do the Pinterest boards, do the things, kind of put it together, do a mood board, and kind of build out the room, build out the space. You know, this last house I did kind of one room at a time, one space at a time. And I think this house I'm going to do differently. I think I'm going to do it all at once. And I know that sounds crazy and expensive, and it will be, but there was much more work, actual structural, practical work that had to, like construction work that had to be done in the house that I was in, you know, just finished. And this house is mostly cosmetic. I think I want to add a couple windows and move a couple walls, but nothing major really that has to be done. So it is mostly aesthetic. So if you're hiring a painter to do some trim and some doors, you might as well like really think through the house, do all of your mood boards, get all your samples up on the wall, and then have the painter come in and do it all. You know what I mean? And not belabor it, or maybe do one floor at a time. But
Are you going to do that before you move in?
no.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's no way. There's also like something about living in it a little bit so that you can see how you naturally flow in the space. You know, I think like younger Erin would have been very much about doing everything as quickly as possible. But now let me get my stuff in the space, lay it out the way I think, you know, the way I visualized it working. But then see actually spatially how it works, if the scale of things are right. It's because you don't want to throw away really good pieces that you love, but or give them away or sell them or whatever. Because there might be different ways to use them. Yeah, I could just start thinking like that one couch is perfect for the size room we have, but it might be small in that room. Like, what do we do? Well, maybe it could be like a side couch. You know what I mean? But then our bedroom is super big, which, you know, right now our primary suite is quite small. And so I'm like really excited to have all this space in our primary. The idea that I could be like working on my laptop at night or doing something in the bedroom, like that is like I'm cozied away and I'm getting ready for bed, but I'm just kind of finishing up some spreadsheets or some design work or whatever, is kind of appealing, you know. So maybe a couch can go up there with a nice little table or something. You know,
that's it. We're not talking about anything else. We are going to decorate your house on this podcast.
I know.
We're doing interior design today.
But I do love that. I love that so much. I love creating spaces. I think, you know, even with the office here, like you have to live, like your work has to live up to being in this space. And
Yeah.
I feel like at home, like you have to live up to the space that you're in. I think, you know, I don't know. There's just something about having a clean, tidy, considered home full of, you know, vintage stuff and antique stuff and, you know, and new stuff that all kind of lives with you. I think it's a really beautiful thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, like all right, this is a slightly work-ish
Yeah.
thing, but like when I'm doing a project, I have to check things off. I have to like finish a thing and get it off the list. So I don't have like a ton of things that are partially done. Like, and that kind of sounds like it has a similar sort of feel. Or I mean, I guess even if I'm working in the yard, like you don't want to be like, well, I mowed half the yard.
No, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know even just to sit down and do work or do a project at home, I'm very much about like setting up. So like for me, setting up to do work is cleaning off my desk, making sure my paperwork is filed away, kind of like setting the table for it. And in a way, it's like setting up for gingerbread houses or for wreath decorating or, you know, buying materials for yarn. There's something about like the organization of it all and the prep work that goes into it that feels, you know, really good. It's probably like a chef feels about setting a beautiful table for dinner.
Yeah. They have a term for that. It's I'm going to mispronounce it because it's French, but mise en place or something.
Yeah.
There's that. Yeah. That's like, it sounds like, and it is very satisfying. Even when you're cooking, it's like, I got to assemble the ingredients and then it's like, bum, bum, bum. If you're in Harry Potter making your potion, you probably have your, I have Newt and whatever ready to go.
Totally.
You don't run to the bodega for your Eye of Newt like midway through the recipe.
You gotta have that ready.
Exactly.
Well, I
was just reminded when you were talking about fibers earlier, I did take like one of my last electives at SCAD was a fibers 101 course, and that opened my entire world. I was not expecting how much I would learn in that class, but just like the nature, the quality and the specific characteristics of each material, and also just kind of the greater, this has always stuck with me since I took that class, by the way, but the nature of fiber arts as a medium and like the things that we see in fine arts museums compared to what we designate as craft work, which was often women's work, like the embroidery, the sewing, the crocheting, and how there's been like kind of unspoken, that's lower art compared to the painters and the illustrators and whatnot. And that like completely, that's never left my brain ever since.
Yeah.
But it is so much work, and I love how tactile it is and how expressive you could get with your choices of what you use, which is reminding me of how you approach your homes and everything and interiors. I'm just like reminded of that class and all the lessons that I had learned there. But yeah, there's like a gender thing to it too. And I'm imagining like trying not to get into work here too much, but as a female studio owner, like all of this is parlaying into how people perceive and what the work actually entails. And even in life, like this is my thing and I'm good at it. And I have a lot of like, I take it seriously and it should be taken seriously. Like people should see my crocheted art and think like, damn girl, you did that.
No, I remember in college, I took like a basket weaving class and I had like traditional paintings in the honor show and I had like my basket in the honor show. And I was just as proud of both. I think, you know, it's really interesting. As much as I'm an artist, I'm also a technologist, you know? And so for me, they're kind of the same. It's using materials and processes to create new things and efficiencies and just to create beautiful things in the world. You know, in real life there's nothing like, I don't know, where we all work in the computer and we're used to outputting things. And when we make those things, they're usually for somebody else, right? Like they're not owned by us. We are commissioned to create them on behalf of somebody else. So there is something about just like creating something because you enjoy the process, like, and not necessarily because of the outcome. Now I'm very outcome oriented. So if I don't like it, I'm going to pull it apart and start all over. But you know, it's more private. It's about you or who you want to gift it to, you know, and not necessarily about like meeting somebody else's needs. You know, most of the needs that I have when I'm doing these other things are more just about not doing the thing, taking time to specifically not do the thing I do all day. Right. So, but it is interesting when like they converge and a personal passion like the fiber arts and a technology passion kind of converge together in some fun ways. You never know. So, yeah,
that intentional.
Yeah.
Like the choices and like you reminded me, Sabrina, talking about class. Isn't there an expression called the integrity of materials or something like that? It's there's some concept I remember from art school a million years ago now. That's like that talks about the, you know, like the choices you make in the materials, like that can be an important part of.
It's definitely an important part. I don't know if it's a saying, but it's definitely important. Yeah.
My brain cells have changed over every 7 years, and 3 times now. But I think that's really cool, and that really, you know, you really show like a passion for process, but also a passion for source. And I think that if we want to take what we do seriously as computer-based artists, I think it would do us ourselves a disservice not to feel that the things we do digitally can have that as well. Like the things we choose to use, like we shoot with a nice camera, we use really nice textures. Those are the slate and the mahogany of our you know, field, right?
Well, and just the curation of what we do. You know what I mean? Like when people talk about AI and generative AI, I'm like, well, you still need a point of view. You still have to know how to ask it to get what you want. And then it's going to give you a million options. Like that's the thing about the computer, is that it doesn't really know what you want. It's just throwing stuff at the wall. So you, as the person kind of going through that, have to say, oh, this is actually where I want to head with it. And it's that curation and intentional prompting, and then obviously moving it into posts and doing stuff with it there, that's what makes it have your point of view, even though there's a computer doing a lot of the work there.
It's archery versus, what is it, Plinko?
Pachinko?
Yeah.
Is that what is it called?
Pachinko?
Pachinko. Okay, yeah.
It could also be Plinko. It sounds like
I don't remember. I don't know.
That's
Inko. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting.
Yeah. Penny, I had interrupted you earlier. I don't know if you remember what you were going to say before. No?
No, because my brain is Pachinko.
Gotcha. We've all been there.
And for everybody, it's Friday. Late in the day. So we're transitioning into weekend mode. But
that's good.
Yeah.
Last thing you mentioned offline is you like to write. You like to create your own IP.
Yeah.
Which is a little different because, you know, like you're not collecting antiques, or you're not creating, you know, like buying furniture and decorating. Like these are things that are like completely whole cloth, right? So
yeah. Well, yeah, I love writing. I love concept creation. I think that if again, my younger self, I would have never imagined in a million years that I'd be a writer of any sort. I've always been very much a designer in that I'm a problem solver. Like you give me a problem and my job is to solve it visually, right?
Yeah.
And then, you know, at a certain point, as I was starting to really become a creative director, a legitimate creative director, I like couldn't write well, right? And I don't just mean correctly, because as I was trying to learn to write correctly, it didn't sound like me. It sounded like the robot version of me, or like this person trying to be a creative director. So I started taking writing classes at Second City. And just because my tone is a little bit more humor on calls, I tend to lean into being a little bit of a potty mouth and a swearer, and just kind of like disarming our mostly male clients, right? Like, and just being kind of a very approachable person, and being honest about our work, and not just talking about what works with the work, but also what doesn't work with the work yet. So being like really like a real person. And I felt like that wasn't coming off in my writing, and it was very, very frustrating. And so I started taking some writing classes at the Second City, and I was like, once I found my voice from a writing perspective, I started realizing like actually there are some ideas there. And you'd have a moment in your life or like an episode, right? And then you're like, wow, that's a show, So starting to write that up, well, what does a pitch look like, and how does that work? And you're friends with all these showrunners and other people out in the world, collaborating with them and putting some scripts together and shopping things around, because you never know when something can strike. Somebody might be looking for something right at that moment that it winds up on their desk, because I do believe that while there are brilliant ideas out there, like it has to be at the right time in the right place where somebody is open enough to accept it, right? Like there's got to be a lot of stars that align to have that moment happen. But also you have to be a person that kind of has a lot of output, so your chances of that happening are higher, right?
Yeah.
So I'm like for sure a high functioning person, and I always have 6 or 7 things going on simultaneously besides what's happening at work. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I would definitely call them hobbies. They're not professions yet until I start making money off of them. But I specifically people like, oh my God, you should sell these wreaths. And I was like, but then it's a job.
Yeah.
I don't like, if ever a show of mine gets picked up, it'll be turned into a job, and I will staff it properly, because I've learned as a business owner, that's how you have a job. That's how you create a system and infrastructure and all that stuff. That's how you build that out, or hire somebody to build it out, right?
Yeah. So, I also like that because in terms of like, if you were to flesh out one of these writing ideas and projects or pitches, then it becomes a communal thing. Mm-hmm. Whereas like writing is one of the first things I wanted to be when I grew up. It was like, I think that was when Harry Potter was really, really popular, like when I was very young. And then I was thinking like reading Harry Potter, like, I think I could write a better book. I'm going to become like the world's youngest writer. That was like the dream when I was in elementary school. Then I'm like, oh, wow, this is hard. But I also thought as a kid, like, I envisioned writing as this is a very solitary activity. If I were to follow that professionally, I'd be like alone in some cubicle or little personal office doing my writing, and then that's kind of it. But now getting older, like there's classes, like you said. Are you in a writing group as well, or is it mostly like a solo thing for you personally?
It's not a solo thing. I have writing partners. So it's not a group, but we push each other and we challenge each other. And, I've learned with design, with everything you do, if you really like for these ideas, they're not just for me. They're to ultimately, hopefully be produced someday and to be of service in some way. I like every idea kind of has something about it that I think is of, even though it's a comedy, most of them are comedies, even though they're funny, like there's some kind of nugget of truth in there I want to put out into the universe that like makes the world better.
Yeah.
Weird way to say it. But I do think that you need outside perspective on things. Like you need to see how people see it so that you can then respond. If you care about that sort of thing. I mean, some fine artists don't care about that and they would be offended by that. But I like input, and in this case, it's curated input because I'm asking specific people. I'm not just putting it out there and asking everybody.
Right.
So,
I'm also curious about Second City. I thought, like, I know that name because of improv, but Second City, they offer writing classes. That's really cool.
Yeah, all sorts of classes, writing, acting. When I started directing, I took a couple acting classes, and I was
fun. How did you like that?
I hated it. No. No, I hated it. I couldn't remember my lines. I'm not a memorizer.
That's what always shocks me. I'm like, how are people able to remember what they're supposed to say? And like, I know it's a script, but like, how do you keep it there? And
like, you're supposed to be in the moment, like feeling the feelings. And I'm just like, well, how am I supposed to be in the moment, feel like the feeling, and remember this sentence? Yeah. I just like don't get that. People, the actors are really special. Like when you see these like amazing actors, it's like no joke. Like what they do is, I mean, they're on a pedestal for a reason, you know, for their craft. So
Yeah.
crazy.
No, it takes a special skill for sure.
Terrible. But I did learn about receiving direction, you know, and what that felt like. So like when it's very rare that I'm directing with talent, especially speaking talent, because that's not what my portfolio really supports when they're pitching me for directing live action. But you know, you really kind of learn being like a student what kind of gets you frustrated, you know what I mean, and what's kind of helpful feedback and what's not helpful feedback.
Yeah.
So I was at least like, let me put myself in these people's shoes, because because the way I was thinking about direction prior to that was very much talking to plants, like move this person over there, and
Yeah.
you know, it's more spatial, and okay, you do the rest, you know what I mean. But you know, even in commercials and things like that, there needs to be authenticity, especially if you're dealing with real people, which most of my work usually is because of just where my portfolio is. So yeah.
Awesome.
That's super cool. it's what
You know,
you have a breadth of stuff of interest. It's really like
yeah,
really neat to see all of the how you sort of navigate all these different skills and interests and developing them. It's
yeah.
really
I
admirable.
think I'm just curious. You know what I mean? Like, and when I move into something and I start doing it, I really see where my deficiencies are, and I don't pretend like they're not there. You know what I mean? Like as I was really trying to write briefs, and like I was writing competent briefs, but you know, I'm writing directors' pitches and things like that. And most directors don't even write their own pitches. There are treatment writers that do that. And I just think that's such a load of shit. Like, it should take you more than an hour of just like spouting some bullshit on the phone to a treatment writer to put a treatment together. I should, as I'm reading that treatment, I should feel like I'm talking to you.
Yeah.
Like your
'Cause
voice
I
is
imagine like being able to direct, that's like a pretty strong form of communication.
Yeah.
And so writing is also a form of communication. It's like all these skills tumble into each other.
Yeah,
So I imagine if you practice one, it only strengthens the other and vice versa.
totally.
So yeah, directors, listen up. You got to write your own stuff.
We're already starting to do our
Yeah,
I'm
I'm
like,
eyeing the clock, and I think we're transitioning into.
yeah, I mean, it's just been such a
You can talk about
natural,
it,
like, Erin, talk to us about how all of these things that you do help you with your work, and that you've already been talking about it, but let's go.
Well, I mean, like one project I'm working on right now is basically all of the things that we've talked about, minus the like maybe decorating. Yeah,
It's not too late.
No, I know there's got to be a way to incorporate it, but you know, with the fiber arts, you know, when AI started to come out and there was the opportunity to like upload your image, and everybody was turning themselves into musicians and superheroes and wizards. Remember, like everybody that was on AI that had any understanding of how to do it, or if their kid was doing it, they were having their kid do them, of like making themselves into a wizard or something, or a superhero more likely. And you know, I was definitely playing around with AI, but my friend Austin, he was doing that. He was turning himself into a superhero. And I was like, hey, I want to do that, but I want to turn myself into a Muppet. And he's like, okay, let's play. So we get in a Discord group together, and we start making stuff. And he came up with some base prompts, and that was like getting us there. And then I started adding all my fiber arts terms, right? Like stitch patterns and felting and this and that and big googly eyes and puppet, you know, like all the things. And like, boom, we did it. Like it took a bit of time and effort, but there I was, right? Like, and there he was, he did himself too. And then we started doing, of course, our significant others and our kids, and then our friends saw it and we posted on social media and people were like, how are you doing that? And I just like kept going and going and going. And it was super, super cool. And there was a moment though, it kind of stopped working. We were in mid-journey and it stopped working. And we were like, I guess the AI has moved on, and it started to get just way too photoreal. Like, however it was being trained, it wasn't working for us anymore. And so then actually Dwart stumbled across this notion that you could work in an older model of the AI. And so I figured out what model we were working in, and we were back in business, babe. And so I kept going and going and going. And I, of course, talked to my lawyer and all this stuff. And I figured out I created this series of whimsical felted portraits that I called Meet the Scrimps. And I, at a certain point, started the Instagram called Meet the Scrimps. And, Austin fell off, but he's back on, and we're both creating again together. It's just been so fun. It's such like an outlet, but I've also turned it into a show idea treatment, and that's being shopped around. And it's just really exciting because it's like, it's fiber arts, it's technology, it's writing and storytelling and doing bits and things like that. And I'm just like, it's lighting up. So it was also like branding for, like the name and the idea and building IP. And I was just like, this is so fun. Even if it goes nowhere, like we've already grown our audience on Instagram to something like, it's over 25,000 followers now. Wow. So yeah, it's just like this weird thing. And so we work on it on the weekend, Austin and I, and then I schedule the posts for the week. And, so like every weekend there's work to do for this like weird little side project, but it's just super fun,
Yeah, that's not too dissimilar from how Penny and I are approaching NoGraph. It's like, this is our side podcast. But we collaborate together, and that's what makes it really fun.
I'm fascinated by this idea that, like, well, mentioned earlier, like you like materials, you like the fabrics, you like the different pieces, you like quality ingredients, right?
Yeah.
And now this project that you're really interested in, the quality ingredients that you're using are your hobbies. And you're like, one of them is fabric arts. That's your element that you set out before making the gingerbread house. Like, that's
totally.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it's great. And, people think they're real, and then they like feel duped that it's AI, but I'm like, well, it's really actually super hard to achieve these textural results in AI. Like it so desperately wants to push it in this photoreal.
Yeah, like smoothed out.
Yeah, like cartoony kind of CG looking. And so to get these results and to be able to control the AI in that way for anybody that's even been using it, I get notes from them on the side going like, how are you achieving these results? Like how?
Yeah, it doesn't want to make anything it has never seen.
It does not want to do that. Yeah, it just naturally out of its element. So then, I explain, and people are like, holy shit, that's just crazy. It's amazing and crazy, but it's cool though.
Yeah. I think I'm seeing the intersection of all the things that we've talked about today, like the curating and just a systemic step-by-step process to things, but also honing in on the details that make things special, but not also bringing in a community aspect to it too, and not just doing everything just alone, with blinders on. And I think that now I have a better understanding. I think this perfectly encompasses not just Sarofsky, the studio, but Erin Sarofsky, the person.
Yeah.
That's what I'm coming away with from this conversation.
Yeah. It's so interesting. When I had just left Digital Kitchen, and I was really trying to figure out what my next step was, or maybe it was Superfad. It must have been just after Superfad. And I was very like lost in trying to figure out what I was going to do next. And, I think it was Tool. A couple of places were looking at me as a director. And I was just like, I know I lead these projects as like a creative director, but I'm nothing without my team. Like I can't rebuild that on every single project, you know. When I direct, I want a certain DP, you know, one of this guy or that guy, or, you know, it's just gal, whoever, you know, it's so about who you have around you. Um,
Yeah.
Sharing a brain, challenging you, you know, getting to the details, all of that stuff. I think it's super important. Yeah. That's why I like feel like credit lists are really important. Creates like a lot
Oh,
of
thank you for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Whenever I go and see, like, try to look who made a project and they don't include a credits list, I'm
Yeah.
judging. Just, I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
Like, you didn't make that. Like, it's
By
not just one
yourself.
person. It's
Yeah.
a body of work by a body of people.
Yeah.
So I'm with you on that, Erin. That's a big deal to
100%.
me.
Totally. Yeah. It's a team. This has been so refreshing to not just talk about work.
That's what we're here for.
You guys
We also have this ticker that we made from an earlier episode. I forget what the context is, but I feel like
That's
I think that was when we were testing out. We knew we wanted to do as one of our. This was before we recorded a single episode. We knew that we were just prepping possible Erin Sarofsky.
Yeah, I love that. Because this is a great setup here. I've used Riverside as a platform, but this is a cool platform too. Yeah.
It's pretty good. I only know about it because a friend of mine complains about it, and he was like, "It's too simple. It's like, yeah, it's easy to use, but you don't have like all this flexibility." I'm like, "That's great."
Yeah, that's
because
what we want.
I don't want to think about it.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's perfect.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Well, thanks so much, Erin. I don't want to take up any more of your time because you've been so generous.
No worries.
But this has been such a pleasure.
Yeah. The thing I did want, it's not even my event, but Camp NoGraph is really great for motion designers who want to unplug, and it's in Chicago. I think they probably sold out, but I have been a couple of times, and it's in our neck of the woods, so I'll be up there again. And it's just a nice way of meeting like all of your people, but not in a studio environment, in an outdoor environment, watching people kind of deal with nature.
I think we were both at the first one.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, spoke at it, so we were probably both there.
You spoke at it. I was a counselor.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah, it was fun.
I had just had a baby at that point. She was probably like a year or two old, and I was as pretty out of it as a human could be.
It was awesome having you there. That was when I met you, and I was like, "Oh, you're fantastic."
Thank you. That's very sweet.
Awesome. But let's close this out. Again, thank you so much for joining us on NoGraph. This has been the longest podcast we've done because you have so much interesting to say, and it's a joy.
Well, you can edit stuff out if you need to.
Thanks, Erin.
Thank you guys so much.
See you next time on NoGraph. Bye.